Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking another look at the 787. Now, this plane's been updated quite a bit since we last took a look at it, so I thought this would be a good time to kind of crack it open once again and kind of deal with all the fun that is a big Boeing. Let's get started. So for the purposes of today's video, we're going to be going through everything up through basically getting this up to cruise altitude. In the follow-up video, of course, we're going to be dealing with basically cruise altitude down to the ground. Now, to keep things nice and fresh and consistent here over at lovely Bradley International Airport, we're going to be flying down to BWI, which is a very, very short flight for a plane like this, but it will work perfectly fine for us. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing that I have done here is I've actually taken a little bit of time to go ahead and get myself a flight plan all built up in my little good friends over here at SimBrief. The reason I've taken the time to do this is we can actually import SimBrief flight plans directly into this airplane now, which is definitely an advantage if you have a very long and very tedious flight plan to enter. For us, of course, we're going to keep things kind of simple, and we're actually going to dial most of it in for ourselves today. You can see we're using the Coastal 9 via Charlton, going direct Torpor, Quebec 167. There's a lot of really good stuff in this flight plan that's going to be rather challenging for us to enter, and we'll take a look at that when we get there, of course. So let's go ahead and get some electrical power flowing through this one. We have a bunch of different ways to do it, depending on what we're doing and how much time it's going to take us to do it. It is fall, and it's not just fall, but it is chilly. So I'm going to run things off the APU so we can get some heat in here today. So I'm going to flip my head up here, and it's just a matter of working our way through a pretty standard flow. Battery comes on. We're going to get a couple warning lights. One thing I do want to emphasize very strongly here is this aircraft is not a systems one-to-one kind of plane. It is more than good enough to get you going, and it's pretty good in VR too, but it is definitely not everything here works kind of thing. So what I'm going to do is come up to my APU switch. I'm going to go ahead and snap that to the start position, and if you listen super carefully, yeah, it's pretty hard to hear. My tail's smoking. It probably can't be safe. So once that gets going, of course, that's going to give us some precious electrical power, which is going to allow us to start goofing around and doing everything else. So while that sucker's booting up, I'm going to start down a pretty standard flow here. We're going to start in the upper left corner. We're just going to make our way down. Good. Everything's already on here. We don't need any windshield wipers. I'll be honest, you don't really use windshield wipers very often on a plane. Coming down here, battery test, towing power. Whoa! Oh, I wish this was easier. Flight deck door power, we're going to go ahead and flip that on. That should be all set. You can see we've got some warning lights as far as heat goes. It's okay. Hydraulic systems, we don't really need hydraulics right now, but just for sake of being significant or consistent here, we'll flip them to the auto position, which will help us out. Passenger signs, we're going to put that to auto as well. We don't need storm lights. Unfortunately, we don't have a switch for that. Coming up here, of course, so we'll make our way down the next thing. This looks good to me. This looks good to me. This looks good to me. I'm going to leave start alone, and we'll start them up later. We've got our fuel pumps. You'll notice one of the lights is out, and the reason it is out is because it is for our APU. So I'm going to make sure that's enabled. Coming down here, we're going to leave anti-ice alone. We're going to turn on a nav light just to give everybody around us a quick little warning that says, hey, just so you know, we have hydraulic pressure, so stay away kind of a thing. Coming down here, looks good. We'll flip on the two packs. That'll get us some heat finally, and then we'll float our heads back down here. Now, when you first boot this thing up, you're going to have a lot of angry warnings here. You've got a warning and a caution. I can clear that like that. And you'll also notice if I float down here that our FS is basically screaming at us, telling me we've got all sorts of different problems to be afraid of. Oh, no, we're doomed. Can you hear? I can just hear the heat turning on in my headphones here, and it's like, oh, sweet, give me some of that precious heat. And of course, this looks pretty bad, like we're doomed. But that's okay, because it's part of the fun. One of the cool things with the 7.8, and the thing I really appreciate about it, especially as a VR user, is it makes it much easier to see what's going on with these huge screens. One of the things I love is this is a touch screen. Like I can hit here, and I can see my APU generators doing all the work. Hydraulic pressure, I can see very carefully that we have no hydraulic pressure. Actually, we have plenty, yeah, basically none. We got fuel. You can see kind of we got a little bit of fuel coming out of it to the APU there. My air systems, you can see we're starting to cook us a little bit here. I have no doors. Nobody's in the bathroom. Cool. Landing gear is good. We've got a flight control page here. Everything looks good. Obviously, that's fine. FS display, we just don't have that. Maintenance, nope. CB, nope. So I'm not going to worry about that too much. The important thing that we do have here, though, is you get kind of like a little systems page, which is kind of handy because it kind of gives you an idea of sort of what's going on around it. You can see the APUs running, plenty of air, all that other stuff. So our next big game, of course, is to kind of get the FMS all programmed and ready to go for the purposes of our flight today. Now, the flight management computer couldn't be simpler in this plane. But one of the things I'm a little worried about is I'm looking over my fuel quantity, and I can see that I have a fantastic much more fuel than I will ever need for a flight this short. So one of the things you can do is if you actually come down here and press the index button, is there is a settings button in the bottom right corner. Now, if I hit this, it allows me to control some nice little things like the IRS. Of course, if I press the next button, you can go ahead and play with all your settings for your good friends over at SimBrief. I'm not going to worry about that today. Instead, I'm going to go to Weight and Balance and push that button. This allows you to dial in details for your flight. So, for example, let's say I wanted to do 344 passengers. I can go down here to 344 and actually click that, and it'll automatically set that up for me. You can see it's doing that. But more importantly, if you see this thing down here, this is set from OFP. If you remember, I was mentioning something about SimBrief. I can actually click that button. And what it will do is it'll reach into our good friends over at SimBrief, and it'll actually suck down all the data. So you can see here, my passengers changed, my payload has changed. My fuel is only 26,000 pounds right now, which is much better. I also noticed that my center of gravity is much more polite at 31.17. This is going to make us crazy in a few minutes, so I'm going to make sure we get that set later on. So with this all done, I'm pretty good to go. I'm going to press the init ref button, and it's going to take me back to the page at index, and now we're ready to actually get this thing programmed the way that we're going to need it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to start at pause. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to dial in where we are. You'll notice right now, its GPS pause is right over here, North 41. As a matter of fact, if I click on this, you'll notice that it copies it down here. Now, your instinct says, oh, this is just like every other aircraft I've ever done. You copy it, you come here and you click. Nothing happens because that's not how this one works. As a matter of fact, if you go to the next page, you will notice your FMC position's already been pre-selected because it's working off of the GPS right now. So if I wanted to actually fill this out just for completion, you could actually come in here and dial in the airport that you're currently on, bop it, and now it will fill itself in to make you feel maybe a little bit better that that box is not just empty anymore. So I'm going to go to the route page next. And of course, if you're used to other Boeings, it will say the airport you just dialed in. It doesn't do that here, so you just got to dial in again and pop that button. Now, the interesting thing here is we actually could come in here and request the specific route that we want right out of SimBrief. Like I said, I'm going to be entering that manually for the purposes of this video. But one thing I do want to do real quick is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go ahead and get the weather. So I'm going to come into my little radio here at 118.15 is the frequency. I'm going to go toss it in there. I'm going to press the transfer button, and that's going to get us the weather. Let's see, information Charlie, 1300 Zulu, wind is calm, visibility 10. Aha, runway 6 today. Ha ha ha. Runway 6 is a pretty good runway. It's the one I always like, but you never get to use it in the real world. So I'm going to go ahead and do a 06 here. I'm going to toss that in there real quick. Looks good. Destination today, of course, is 3rd Grade Marshall, a.k.a. BWI. Looks good to me. I think our flight today is Pan Am. We're Clipper 100 today. That doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that? It should be Clipper 64. Much better. Nice. So we're all set to go for the route page here, and everything's looking pretty groovy. So I'm going to come down here and press execute and press that button right there, and it's going to expect us to head to the performance initiation page, which is not what we're going to do next. Instead, we're going to be dialing how we're going to get down, as goofy as that sounds. So I'm going to go ahead and open this one up. Of course, they're recommending 2.4. I don't like 2.4. I just don't need it because 6 is right in front of me, and also the wind isn't that strong. But it is telling me that I want to use the Coastal Niner, and it also is telling me when I get there that I want to use MIDI 2 to get down to the ground. Now, that's really useful for us because we can dial that in as we're starting at endpoints immediately. Departure arrival, you can see there's my Coastal Niner ready to go. We have nothing special for that, so press execute. Press Dep R again. You can see arrivals ready to go for BWI. Click there and you get everybody. You can see here we have the MIDI 3, which is the up-to-date one. And if you remember, it said via the Laugh-In transition. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that one, press execute. Now, believe it or not, our flight plan is almost complete. If I actually were to go to the route page real quickly here and go down to our next page, you'll observe that you have the starting point, and you'll see we have our ending point. We could actually go so far as to watch this, departure, arrival, arrival. We can even come here and dial in the runway, in which case we know it's 33 left. So I can literally come in here and say, I want to do it via JANS or something like that. I'm not going to worry about that. Now, of course, I'll go back to my route page. Go next page here. You can see that everything is here. It's looking for a way to get from here to here. I'm going to fix that real quick. Watch this, watch this. So what I can do here is I can press delete, and I can actually clean this out. Now, if I press execute, it knows that we're trying to go from MIDI 3 direct to ILS 3.3. And again, it's simplifying things. If I go to the legs page, you can actually see the... If we go to the legs page, you can see the specific pieces I need to go through to get all the way to the ground. But on the route page, it's going to give us those kind of broad strokes if you want to think about it. All right. So what I'm going to do now is head back to my route page here, go to my next page, and I'm going to dial in the other features of my flight. Now, if you remember, our next position here is CCC, which has been selected, and then we're supposed to get on TOPRR next. So all I'm going to do is type that one in. TOP, Romeo, Romeo. Go ahead and click that. It's going to expect that. I'm going to hit it on this side because this is a waypoint. It's going to say, which one of the two did you mean? I'm like, huh? So you pick the top one. It's fine. And now it's going to ask us how you want to get to the next point. Now, if you remember from our flight plan, we're going to be taking the Quebec, and it's going to be 167. Now, since this is an airway, we're going to put it on the left, and then it's going to expect us to tell us how to get off the airway. And we're going to be getting off the airway via Zizi, which is a fantastic name for something. Toss that one right in there. And then we're going to be going direct to NUC. So K, let's see, November, uniform. Let's see here, we need a, let's see here, kilo here. Nice. Click right there. There is no airway that we're getting. We're just going direct to it. And then it wants us to go to Alpha, Tango, Romeo, which is also going to be direct. I'll toss that in there. It's going to ask me two different ones. You have to be very, very careful here. Is it asking us for Waterloo, or is it going to be asking us for a Tireu? We definitely don't want to get this wrong, but we know we're heading south today, so it's most likely going to be that one, which is good. And lastly, but not leastly, it's LAFLN. But if you look, it's already there waiting for us. So all I need to do now is get rid of this little blank spot. And as you saw a few moments ago, the quickest way to do that is to just hit delete and delete it. Or if you want to be lazy, you can click here. It's going to get grumpy. That's right. You have to delete it. Never mind. We'll do it the correct way. So I'm going to press the delete key and go ahead and delete that one right there. And now if I zoom up, you can see I've got Coastal 9, direct Quebec 167, NUC, our ETR, direct MIDI 3, direct ILS 33, missed approach if we need it. Now, one of the things we can do, which is really cool, I'm going to press execute, which is this little button over here on the ROM, is we can actually open up the legs page, and we can actually surf through each one of these different components to make sure we didn't miss anything, which is going to be very important for us later on. And keep in mind, you can change this. You're not stuck with it. Another really, really fun trick that you can do with this, which makes it really cool, is if you go to the plan menu here, unfortunately, because this is a simplified aircraft, we wouldn't be able to do this, which is kind of a bummer, because I like that because you could go waypoint by waypoint and check it. But that's okay for us, because this is going to be perfectly fine. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to init.ref here. It's going to bring us back to this page, which is going to be the performance. Now, the nice thing is we've already loaded our aircraft up with stuff. So if I want to go ahead and dial these features in, I can actually click right here on the left. It'll copy the value, and then I can just click again. Now, reserves is a slightly trickier number. And unfortunately, if you are using some things like the other programs, you can look up your reserves directly so you can figure out exactly what it's going to be here. So let's go ahead and look at that over on SimBrief. And SimBrief says 4.5. So I'm just going to come in here, 4.5, press that one real quick. Looks good to me. Cruise altitude, we can get that right off of SimBrief as well. Cruise altitude today, I think that'd be like the first number you see, is 34,000 feet. So a couple different ways we can do that. Go back to init.ref here. You can type in 340, which would be the flight level, and bop that button. Cost index, we'll steal that one right off of SimBrief as well, and we can just dial that in. Check, 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 check. Looks good. I'm going to press the execute button. It's going to be looking for something called thrust limb next, and it's going to come into here. It's going to say, would you like to select the outside air temperature? Nah. Instead, I'm going to pick up takeoff. I'm going to do climb. That's going to be good. That's going to be good. Takeoff. We're going to be using 5 degrees of flaps today. We're not going to do anything fancy, but we do need to set our center of gravity. To do this, it's really easy. Just click that button. This is 31. I clicked it one more time. It's going to recommend a trim of 2.50 for us today. Now, what I'm going to do is come over here where I have all my V speeds. I'm going to go ahead and click right here to go ahead and copy the V speed directly over into that page. And then importantly, this V2 number I need because I need to run up to my computer real quickly and I need to dial that in. So if you saw, it was 154 knots. So I'm going to come into here and dial in 154 knots, just like that. And now that's looking pretty good to me. At any point, of course, I can hit that. Now, coming down here, you'll also notice that it gave us this trim of 2.5. And if I look over here, it actually highlights it here to remind you that it's supposed to be 2.5. Now, one of the fun things with this lovely flight simulator aircraft is they don't do a very good job of balancing this aircraft. So watch what happens when I go down to 2.5. Right there. You can see I've got my 2.5 selected, and you can see I have my 2.5 ready to go over down here. And of course, that's exactly the way we want it. My stabilizers are all nice and trimmed out. This FMS is now good to go. There's nothing else we need to do with this at this time. So the next step, of course, is to go hit up our checklist. And I'm going to come down to here where it says checklist and click that button. Now, if this bothers you, one of the things you can do, of course, is you can spin these things all over the place, switch it back to CDU. A lot of times I'll put the checklist on a different screen. Like if I go like this, you can see I put the checklist here. So the way this works is pretty easy. Simply go to normal. And if you go to the normal menu, you can pick what checklist you want. So if I put pre-flight, this is done. I press normal and it jumps to the next one. So now we can just work our way down the list. Passenger signs, we're going to set that to auto, checked. Mode control panel, we're going to make sure this is all set. The only thing not set here is we really should be on runway heading here. So I'm going to come over here, and runway heading at this particular airport for today is going to be 57 degrees, just like that. Looks good to me. So that's a checked item. Check altitude is going to be 34,000 feet, if you recall. Obviously, in the real world, this would be 4,000 feet because of the altitude constraint from the particular departure procedure. That's okay. This is good. CDU pre-flight is good. Trim is set correctly. Taxi and takeoff briefing is good. And now we're ready to go ahead and fire this thing up. This is the fun part. Let's get it fired up. So to fire this thing up, very, very, very simple. Remarkably simple, actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach up here. And now we're going to get fuel pumps onto any tank that has fuel in it. Now for us, of course, if you float down here, you'll see we have no fuel in the middle fuel tank. So we're just going to be using the left and right pumps here. Once this is set, we're going to turn on the beacon light to let everybody around us know that you're going to cause some problems. And you have these two switches for start. Now, the APU on this thing is huge, so I can actually flip this to the run position, which is going to tell us to get to auto start mode. And all I have to do now is reach up here and click my switches. Now, if I rush down here, what you'll observe is the fact that everything is booting up immediately. You can see I've got the auto start warning here. The two engines are coming up. Notice there's no fuel flow yet. That's handled completely automatically on this particular aircraft. Starting to zing up, zing up. Of course, we get our takeoff briefings and all that other good stuff and be pretty much good to go. I can actually press normal and get on my before taxi stuff, but I will check that in a moment. So that's going in a few moments. Yep, we've gotten fuel introduced to it. You can see we've got 0.1 ton there. And it's going to start getting really, really, really hot inside this engine. You can see just how cold it is outside. There's my N1s coming up smoothly. Autopilot disconnect. I'm not worried about that too much. Again, you can sit here and fiddle. Isn't it so much fun to play with? Get it all grumpy at you. So that's good to go. That's coming up quite nicely. And now, as we can see a few moments later, both engines are in the running position, and we're ready for our before taxi checklist. Everything is super duper ready to go. Fantastic. You can fiddle with this all you want if it bothers you, but like I said, I'm not too worried about it. The engines are running, so this is set. I'm just going to reach above my head. I'm going to double check to make sure these are off. We're going to chase our last couple orange lights here. 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks good to me. Looks good to me. Come over here. You can see we've got a warning on the pack lights. The reason they're off, of course, is because I was just starting. Coming to our checklist here, it says anti-ice. I've got that set. I'm just going to quickly go ahead and enable this just in case we bump into, yeah, let's be realistic. We're not going to hit anything. Let's go do a recall checked. We've got 3 warnings here. We have autopilot disconnect there. We can go ahead and push that all we want and get it very, very grumpy at us. I'm not too worried about it. We can come up here and enable the 2 modes. Like I said, not really a problem as far as that goes. We can cancel that away. TCAS is off. If I come floating down here, the reason TCAS is off is because TCAS is off. Let's switch to Tara, which is good. And I've got a warning on emergency lights. That's the universal sign that you forgot to set the emergency lights up correctly, depending on how you have your aircraft configured. I'll go ahead and flip that into the arm position. If it gives you issues, one of the things you can do is you can just cycle it a couple times, and that does get it to go out. We still have autopilot disconnect. I'm not too worried about it yet. So we'll go to autopilot. So we'll check our recall real fast. Press standby recall. We have no warnings, of course. We're going to hit that one. Auto brake should be set to RTO. Come down here to RTO. We're just going to snap it just like that. Flight controls. One of the things we can do is we can give everybody a quick little wiggle to make sure it works. One of the cool ways you can do that, of course, is if you go to systems, you can actually go to flight control. You can actually move everything around to make sure that everything is working properly. You can see pretty smoothly that it is. Ground equipment is clear. APU, we shut that off a few seconds ago. You can hear it actually cycling down. It has a little cooldown procedure. Like I said, I'm not too worried about it. It's perfectly fine. I'm going to go back to normal now, and now it's going to do before takeoff, which is flaps. Now, our flaps, if you recall a few moments ago, have to be 5 degrees. So I'm going to come over here and go click to 5 degrees, and that's going to get the party started as far as that goes. That's going to take a few moments before it actually engages. And now, once it's at 5 degrees, I'm happy with that. Checklist complete. I click normal again, and then it takes us to the after takeoff checklist. Fantastic. So what we're going to do now is get ourselves taxiing over to the runway. Again, because of the way we set everything up today, we made this super duper easy. One of the things you want to keep in mind as you're kind of rolling towards the runway here is just make sure that you are not nothing's weird. You don't get getting any strange warnings. Things aren't cutting on or off one at a time, scaring the bejesus out of you kind of a thing. Stuff like that. Just be kind of mindful as you're kind of cruising along here. I actually want to leave this with CDU, but I do want this one to go ahead. And actually, I have the engine page. You can do the double engine page. But for me, I'm just going to switch it to ND, which is the default. That's the navigational display. Let's pop down the heads-up display so we can see just a little bit better. Looks pretty good to me. You can see I have toga armed there. You can see I have my VNav and LNav armed, which are these two guys right here. Pretty much ready to go, so I'm not too worried about that component. Nice and easy, nice and easy. Now, there's a couple different ways to use our automatic takeoff here in this particular aircraft. One thing many people do is there's the TOGA option. You can do it manually. I'm a huge fan of kind of running things manually just for the sake of kind of keeping things simple for me. Once you start doing things automatically, you always run the risk of that, like one thing you missed somewhere, or maybe you get that last minute distraction. So when you have these really, really high intense, challenging moments, it's always a good idea to kind of do things the old fashioned way. Okay, so let's go ahead and double check. We're going to hit our checklist one last time. This is after takeoff. Looks good to me. I'm not too worried about that yet. Navigational display is set and we're ready to go. Now, one of the things they've done to make our lives a little bit easier, I'll go flip on this one real quickly here, hold down my brake, is they've actually designed it. So you have a little line here. If you look right where my mouse is, this little kind of green arrow, that tells you what your takeoff power is to be set to. The reason that's great is if I take my throttle and I push it about half, you see I can actually see the line on there as the engine spools up. So if I sit here and push this all the way to takeoff power, I know that I'm going to have takeoff power. Now, if I go ahead and release the brake, we're going to do a little bit of a left aileron here just to kind of keep us going. I know that I'm good to go. Engine's going to start spinning up. Everything's good. Now, at any point, I can actually switch to TOGA mode by pushing my TOGA button on my joystick. The other thing you can do, too, is you can press the auto throttle, too, depending kind of how everything is configured on your particular joystick there. Looking good, looking good. We're coming up on our V1. It's going to scream at us about that in a second. We're going to pull back. It's going to come up. Landing gear is going to come up immediately. And we're just going to enjoy a nice, relaxing climb out here. Again, nothing too crazy. We're going to leave the flaps alone until we get a little bit higher up. Very nice. Very, very, very nice. Very smooth. Nice and easy. Nice and easy. I like that. 1,800 feet. We're just going to bring up that click of flaps. Do the flaps relatively gently. We would get a call from Hartford now. Or actually, not Hartford. Bradley would call us about now and said, turn right heading and proceed direct Hartford or something along those lines. Take this a gentle turn. You'll definitely love the fact that this aircraft is equipped with fly-by-wire, which makes it a little bit more user-friendly compared to other aircraft of its type. You're definitely not sitting there running the trim the whole time. There we go. Just enjoying the fact that the heads-up display makes it so easy to see what we're doing. And I'm just taking my nice and gentle right here, and you can actually feel the aircraft pushing back at you a little bit, trying to discourage you from banking so aggressively at low speeds. I love that. It's such a nice job on this one. Come swing around a little bit. Again, we're just trying to line ourselves up with our course. We can't just go boop and push the button there. We definitely have to have a little bit of work done here before we get too far. And you can see there, Hartford's right off my nose. There's 4,000 feet. Let's say we got called from Hartford, or I should say Bradley Air Traffic Control. They told us just climb up to whatever. We're just going to assume that they did that for us today, because normally we would have to level off there. But I'll be realistic with you, that never happens. They just get rid of you basically as fast as they can, trying to hand you off to TRACON before you get too close to Hartford, where everybody in their little puddle jumper plane is kind of doing their thing there. Got to pitch up a little bit. We're getting a little fast here. Now, it's always a good idea to just double check to make sure everything is looking good down here. Pretty good here, pretty good here, pretty good here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn on the automatic pilot. We're going to press that button once. You're going to see the aircraft is going to basically bank a little tiny bit here. We're trying to get it so that it hits this pink line. And to help it out, you can actually see here that if I were to press this button here, just do a hold, is what it'll try to do is it'll try to hold the heading that it needs to hold a few moments ago. The other thing, too, that I could do is I could actually come in here and I could dial in like 210, for example. And the reason that would be beneficial is that would get us on the way to getting onto the magenta line of safety here. Oh boy. Come on. There it goes. It is so challenging to hit these things. As you'll see, I actually have one on my joystick just for this purpose here. I'm going to crank this. And we're crossing 10,000 feet. There we go, right there. Now we're good to go. So now I can actually go ahead and hit select, and then I can press the lateral navigation, and it's going to try to lock on to this. One thing you want to check, though, is if you go down to legs real quickly here, I'm just going to go direct thumb by selecting thumb and then clicking right here. Pressing execute, and you can see the whole aircraft is going to go, and now I'm in lateral navigation mode. So we actually have our left and right. That little ding you heard, by the way, is to remind me to shut my landing lights off, which I never turned on. That's okay, though. And you can see we come swinging here. Good time to go bust out the checklist. Pull up my checklist. That looks good to me. Norm. And again, now we can go to the normal menu here. And we can actually pick after takeoff. It's landing gear. It looks good to me. Press the normal button again. Pretty good to go. And we don't have to do anything until we get to descent. And then we can actually start our process of descending. For now, it's just a matter of climbing. As we're climbing, of course, a couple little things we just have to sort of babysit on this aircraft to make things exciting for us. One thing I like to do is kind of fiddle with the range so that I can kind of see my flight. Like I said, this is a very, very short flight for this plane. So it doesn't take much. You would just want to take a few moments to go run through your systems, make sure nothing's misbehaving. You really should have no orange lights above your head. If we had a little bit more control over the HGS, we could come in here in the FMS and fiddle with this display a little bit to kind of get it a little more customized. But for this, I'm not that worried about it. This aircraft at this point is basically just going to be choo-chooing its way all the way up to the top of descent. Make sure when you're crossing your 18,000 feet that you take a few moments to set the altimeter to STD, standard there. The quickest way to do that is to press this, or if you have a keyboard, just hit the B key. All right, we're just topping off here. You can see we're just about 34,000 feet. A couple things are going to happen now. We're going to get some quick little warnings over down on this side of things. It's going to tell us thrust ref. There's switch over to speed, which is letting us know we're now holding a speed rather than a specific thrust. We're at lateral navigation mode, and we're at vertical navigation mode path, which simply means that we're attempting to follow a vertical path as well as a lateral one. Now, one of the things I will say real quickly here is if you were to come down here real fast and pop up your CDU and go to your legs page, you can see the path it's trying to take vertically by looking over here. We're at flight level 340. Then when we get to NUC, we drop down to flight level 320. The other thing we want to take a look at here is if I zoom out just a wee bit, now you can actually see the symbols on our chart here make it very clear. There's the Toper, which we could not figure out how to pronounce that. There's Zizzy, it's all there. And of course, you can see our top of descent takes place right between Zizzy and NUC. Now, when we get to the top of descent, now as you start to approach top of descent, you might suddenly get a warning that says FMC message. Now, float your head down here, you'll see your FMC says reset MCP altitude. MCP altitude is set to cruise altitude to a lower altitude to enable VNAV descent. But that is something we'll deal with in another video. Enjoy.